Alright everyone, this relates roughly to the Kilroy event, but not completely. It also relates to just, basically what I said, I think now almost a year ago, which is that if the alternative media and creator communities, if we stand together, generally speaking, past our actual ideological differences, it's really hard for the lamestream to really do anything about us because we're too numerous. We've got too many fans, and if we have one another's backs, it's like a tidal wave of support anytime someone's screwed over. We pretty much do well. As if we unite, we're just fine. We don't have to agree on basically any issue across the board, with the exception of, hey, we need to protect the rights of people to utilize the internet, because it's number one where we all are, at least in part, or in many cases primarily, sometimes solely. And we'll be able to say what we want to say. We can't actually have a debate, for instance, with the sort of fighting between some of the skeptic community and like the alt-right. You can debate for 1,000 years, but if you're not united at least to the extent where you're like, hey, but we should be able to have the debate, we should be able to say what we want to say in some venue, in some manner, without undue repression, then you can't even debate over it. You can't even fucking discuss anything. You no longer have the right to do so. You've been, essentially, what I see right now, with the breakdown of communication between the alt-right, the alt-light, the further right, you could call it, classical liberals, the skeptic community, so-called, and all these different sort of loosely intertwined politically minded groups, or socially minded groups. What I see now is a situation where it's like somebody's being mauled by a bear and they're too busy swatting away a mosquito to try to do anything about it. Look, we're all being abused, regardless of what your actual views are. All of us have outside of normal views, even like the radical centrist sort of thing, which isn't technically a thing. What that means is that the person's views being like, hey, can we get along and actually have a discussion, that's outside of the lamestream too. Look, the lamestream right now is driven by severe authoritarian pro-censorship rhetoric, a hatred, a visceral hatred for alternative technology. Minds, Gab, whatever. It's like I look at Gab. Gab is alt-tech. I don't agree with everything Gab has like on their site or on their Twitter. Like sometimes the official Twitter handle, sometimes they put things on there politically or socially I don't agree with. But they should have the right to do that, and they're still alt tech. It's way better than sort of the craptivism that goes on the big tech sites. We have seen over the last year a frenetic and afraid mainstream technological community is being duped into censoring the user bases that largely built their sites in the first place by a combination of political NGOs, which all believe in heavy-handed censorship, most of which are aligned with people like Merkel when it comes to what you should or should not be allowed to say. It's perfectly fine if you shit on somebody's face, but it's not okay to be mildly offensive. That should be a hanging offense, according to some of these NGOs. A combination of them and their advertiser buddies, that they've been leaning on for years. See, there's where the money comes from. The old guard of technology, for better or for worse, is ad reliant. I see that as inefficient. I think a crowd-funded slash, cryptocurrency-driven style of internet might be better. Something that's more peer-to-peer, it'd be more efficient, it's less costly, especially video-related stuff. And I think that can work. Like BitChute's model, I think, is the model of the future of the internet. Honestly, it may be a bare prototype, a real sub-alpha version at the moment, but I think it will take off in due time. Technology will get more efficient as well, which is helpful, especially, again, on the video end. But as long as we're not united on at least the concept of being able to disagree and debate and speak, we're fucked. So when I see like Alsop, and I don't have a problem with James Alsop, again, I don't agree with everything he says, but he seems to be taking joy in the fact that people like left the Kilroy conference, or he's like, it's going to be like the next Tumblr, like the next DashCon, and it'll be funny. Why on earth would you want that? You do realize the people going to Kilroy, you may maybe you dislike one of the organizers or something. I'm not exactly sure about the inside story. Do you dislike me? I'm going to the Kilroy event. I'm doing it in part, I'm going to prop up the concept of free speech. Why would you want the event as a whole when you've got so many different types of people there to fail? It doesn't make any sense. That's not what we should be aiming for. It's like if you had a more identitarian leaning, sort of like a free speech conference. You're like, well, the new right will speak freely. The alt-right, whatever. You had it, and you had like more identitarian stuff. Would you want someone to show up and be like, ha ha ha, you're going to fall apart because you precluded a libertarian from showing up and talking about how open borders are the libertarian official platform, and here's 3 reasons why you should support it. You probably wouldn't appreciate that much. What we should do, this is my feeling, and I've been talking about, I said this over a year ago. I said we need to stand together on the issue of free speech and free expression and opposition to censorship. That's all we need to do, but the censorship is not coming from, oh, some Kilroy organizer said we can't talk about white identitarianism at a conference. That's not censorship. No, you're being censored by Google. You're being censored by Facebook. You're being told what you can and cannot say on a regular basis on Twitter. The entire world is still distracted by the whole net neutrality bullcrap, to the point at which they don't even really care that they're being abused on a daily basis by social media firms. Monopolistic firms, 4 or 5 firms that control half the internet. A huge proportion. You're talking about Google, Facebook, Twitter, and Amazon, the big 4. And of course, there are those beyond that. And then there are tech firms that they, have less of an online presence, but like a Microsoft, an Apple, something that's really gargantuan. It's basically monopolistic when you think about it. That's where abuse comes from. Abuse comes from a source of power. This is, by the way, can I mention something specifically to like Alsop or some other identitarian? You realize that there is a rough similarity between the claim you're making and the claims made in some cases by the further left. The further left says, well, check your privilege. But the thing is, the average person doesn't have any privilege because they don't have any specific power. The power is, hey, this corporation discriminated against people. This government entity was discriminatory. That's where the abuse happens. It's not some little person. It's not the beat cop that they should have a problem with. It's the police commissioner. But they ignore that because it's easier to beat up on other people that are lower down. So instead of beating up on one another, look, the biggest among us have, a few million fans and maybe a 6-figure salary. Now that's comfy, but it's not the same as being Google. That's where the abuse comes from. If we tackle it now, we have a good chance of at least maintaining rudimentary stability on the internet for political and social commentary, which is after all what we all are involved in. It doesn't matter what your specific opinions are. There are people on the left that are probably H.A. Goodman. Fundamentally a progressive, kind of a socialist in many ways. But he's anti-censorship. If you get a heavily censored internet, he might get squashed down too. If the powers that be are neoliberal and they don't like the far left anymore and they like us, trust me. It doesn't matter if you're an ethno-nationalist, a civic nationalist, a libertarian, a classical liberal. It doesn't matter if you're, actual left, like hippie left, don't trust the government or anyone over 30 left, or what you are. If you're outside of the norm, if you're not like partisan politics is real, I trust the government pretty much, and I eat my Wheaties every morning. If you're anything beyond that, they don't like you and they never will. They'll try to abuse us all, so we need to stand together. People need to understand that. I told you it would happen. I hate to keep fucking saying this. But I said, the lamestream will attack alt entertainment. Look what they did to PewDiePie. It was the WSJ. They will attempt to defame and character assassinate people within the alt media. They've been doing that. It's not just people who are identitarian. Anyone that's ever talked to an identitarian is called a gatekeeper. It's the same thing. They hope that we're attacked. Then I see like this stuff, I guess, with this some Trout and Tea related Discord server or something with a hit list. I don't know enough about that, and I don't really care, because I try to stay away from that kind of drama, but it's not helpful. Look, all of you will lose, regardless of what so-called side you're on. We all fucking lose if we get squished out by the lame stream. They're already trying to buy into all these big tech sites. They've even got, like, web hosts trying to go after all media. Look, they did it to Gab already. They're gonna do it again. They're going to keep doing it. We've got a couple years that we have to outlast them. I think we win in the end, whether we're united or not. Do we really want the pain of being like, you got banned 3 times and you got suspended. We muzzled what you can and can't say. You had to use a site with 1/10 the user base, because the mainstream site started fucking itself. Is that really the kind of internet that we want? Like another dark age for the big tech sites? Like the DMCA period, only on steroids, 10 times worse? I don't think that's what we need. I think it's irresponsible. It's also irresponsible to our fans. We've got a responsibility. Those of us who have larger platforms, I think, to try to organize how we can to maintain our platforms for those who have already basically bought into them. They've gotten used to, like, you wake up and you watch Alsop in the morning. You wake up, you watch Lionel. You wake up, you watch like Styx, Razorfists, Malnu, whatever it happens to be. You're a Sargon fan. Okay, well, those people care about the work we're creating. Don't we kind of have a responsibility to at least try? It's within our power. It's not that hard. All we have to do is basically be non-aggressive towards one another. Debate all you want. Call each other names all you want. But that one fundamental premise, the concept of support free speech on the net, the rise of alt tech as an alternative to encroaching censorship, and do what we can to educate people. And hey, it's not just net neutrality. There's a much bigger problem. Those of us who actually create all the content that drive these sites are being abused. We need to do something about that. We collectively have enough power to do so. We can shield one another to a pretty great extent. But we've got to traverse the ideological boundaries between us have to be considered secondary. They can be considered primary. You can say like, well, there's white genocide, so that's the main issue. Okay, think that. You can't even have that debate, though. You can't even express that opinion if we don't protect one another. Because if you start the infighting, there will be no one to protect you, dude. Outside of people that are easily classed as fanatics. Look, the lamestream media is already trying to proclaim that anybody outside of the mainstream is a violent fanatic. Classical liberal, violent fanatic. You believe in too much freedom. You don't believe in censoring harmful opinions. Identitarian, definitely, rejected by the lamestream. A combination of the legacy media, establishment politicians, and their moneyed like corporate buddies are trying to suppress all outside opinions. We terrify them. The rise of alternative media and alternative entertainment terrifies them. They realize that because we are the outsiders, we can build the next generation. And it's going to be a fusion of various ideologies, as it always is. There are some purists that aren't going to like that. The alternative is that we don't build any new future. We all get fucked by neoliberals and neocons. That's the alternative. I would even say this to some of the ideologically motivated people, like a Holt or something. You realize that you're part of the outside too. You're not on MSNBC. You're going to get screwed or you're going to get gobbled up and told what to think, like a true slave. Is that what you want for the country? Is that what you want for the world? Some of you people who are attacking the alternative media, and this isn't like the YouTube creators and Twitch creators and stuff. It goes beyond that. People in like the off hook, the older guard of the newer wave of media, like the Drudge era sort of uprising of web-only media. You will lose too. You're in the same boat that we're in, you just have more money. It's not going to help you. Your $10 million budget means nothing next to a CNN or a Google. It means absolutely nothing. Fox will steamroll you out of existence. While they pretend to hate the people at MSNBC, oh, those evil liberals, they're all the same. They make the same salary, they're part of the same income bracket for a fucking reason. They have offices in the same cities for a reason. They talk to the same people. They hold court with the same politicians. They tell the same stories with a little bit of spin at it, and people think they're wildly different. You can get actual diversity of opinion online, at least for now. That goes away and we become like cable if we abandon rank and essentially say, well, the ideological differences between us are so vast we can't even talk to each other. We can't have a friendly conversation. Look, I've talked with a lot of people online. Some of these people are ethno-nationalists. Some are classical liberals. Some are like H.A. Goodman, like a progressive leftist. I disagree with virtually everybody I have talked to on at least a few issues. There are some that are closer to others, some that are far further than others. But I'm still able, it's like when people on the establishment left, they were criticizing me. They were like with Right Wing Watch's article. This is exactly their strategy. They say, well, Warwick isn't an ethno-nationalist, but he does talk to them, and he doesn't immediately start deriding them and calling them names. That means he's like a dangerous Nazi gatekeeper. I'm supposed to not be able to talk to an entire political class of people, even though we fundamentally agree on what I consider the most important issue of the day, which is web-free speech, and in the public square, the ability to protest, the ability to voice different opinions outside of the mainstream. Look, if we cracked down and said anything outside of the mainstream is dangerous, you can't say it, no, there wouldn't have been a Woodstock. That would have, the furthest left period in our history, like the hippies, they would have been all pounded. They would have been killed. You wouldn't have had that. Vietnam, I guess, would have dragged on. I guess the neoliberals are saying that's a good thing, which makes sense since they've embraced pro-war rhetoric now. And there would have been, things would be so much different and generally so much worse if outside opinions were not allowed to compete with those of the mainstream. That's how progress, by the way, occurs. These people pay lip service to the word, they don't even know what it means. So, you know, as far as the personal drama, like, you know, the shall we dox this person, craptivism against some ideology, oh, evil skeptics, oh, evil identitarians, oh, the libertarian cuck, whatever. I'm not going to be fucking part of that. I'm going to talk to whoever the hell I please. If people want to do the guilt by association game, they will generally lose because I'm capable of standing up to them. But we as a total get screwed over the longer term if we don't stand together, at least somewhat. Again, disagree all you want. I'm aware there are plenty of commentators, including people I've talked to, that disagree with me on things. I disagree with Goodman on a lot of fiscal issues. I disagreed with Molyneux in his summation of Trump's border strategy. I think I disagree with Sargon on some aspects of social policy as well. But I mean, come on, it doesn't matter. Because I can have that debate. See, I'm free to talk to them. I'm free to debate and disagree with them. That goes away. Isn't that more important? Isn't it more important to be able to have a conversation than to be specifically, well, I'm right, everyone else is wrong? Look, okay, you think that. You think your views, from whatever background they are, probably you think they're self-evident because you hold them. People tend to hold their own views in artificially high esteem sometimes, including myself. Yeah, I'm willing to admit that. In order to be unbiased, you got to address the fact that occasionally you have that creeping in bias. But it doesn't matter. You're going to get plowed under and you won't be able to voice those concerns or those views or opinions of any way, shape, or form. You won't be able to do that if we don't stand together. The YouTube creator community will get crushed. We won't be on Twitter. We won't be allowed to be on Twitter. We'll be too far out there for the normies. We won't be able to have a Facebook page. We'll be using alt tech. Well, a lot of people who are like, they're more centrist. How are we supposed to convince people within that neoliberal lame stream that they're being abused and lied to? From whatever perspective we happen to generally hold that opinion, how are we supposed to even interact with them if we have to shelter ourselves in alt tech for several years while the sort of censorship bullshit blows over, as I predict it will? It's going to take a couple of years probably. Do you really want to spend hey, by 2020, most of us won't be around anymore on these big tech sites. We'll barely be building a new, sort of presence for our fans on alt tech. Now, that doesn't sound like much fun. That sounds like a hell of a lot of work we don't technically have to go through. So that's what I would say. Again, short term, very pessimistic about the ability of our free speech to be maintained. Long term, it's more optimistic. But, why would you want to be abused in the meantime? What's the purpose? We need to stand together. It doesn't need to be ideological. We can have all sorts of different opinions, but we have to at least hold that one thing to be true, which is we should have the right to voice those opinions. On that, I think the far left and far right fundamentally agree. I think a libertarian agrees with an identitarian on that specific issue. Well, then we have to start acting like that. All the personal drama and vendettas and the intrigue, it's very soap opera-y, and 10 years ago people would say that's total cringe. Now people act like it's supposed to be taken seriously. Just let it go. All the infighting stuff, it's like, come on. Fundamentally, a lot of us we're just people with a webcam. I'm not going to get involved with it. I've had people that are trying to get me involved in the infighting stuff. I'm not going to do that. I'm not interested in it. So just in full disclosure, I don't have a problem with anybody that I've spoken to, and a lot of people that I haven't. If you're an independent content creator, you have my respect by being an independent content creator. That's just the way that it's going to be. I consider that more important. I can disagree with you on 100% of issues. I hope that you keep speaking. By the way, why would you want to censor someone you think is totally wrong? They'll make a fool of themselves, right? Well, then what's the fucking point? See, there's the thing. There are people on the outside that don't really know anything about content creation. They don't have the skill. They don't have the charisma to do what we do. There are people on the outside who basically get paid to start shit. Yeah, definitely. Probably not any of the major content creators themselves, but certainly there are people who will approach us and try to start personal drama between us because they're being paid to do so. Absolutely. You can think that that's conspiratorial bullshit. Absolute nonsense. It's been happening for years. It always has. Even if it's just a troll, okay, maybe they're not a shill. They're not being paid for it. Okay, they like to cause that drama. Well, then why indulge them? It seems rather moronic to me. That's about all. Peace out.